Alright, so in response to the questions that Michelle Hansen posted in the classroom, or in forms for these slides, the first question is, why is it inappropriate for teachers to ask for a doctor's note? Basically, what she said was that to ask for a doctor's note, doctors, what they see when they have an intervention because of a mental illness crisis is such a small snapshot. There's no way the doctor can predict the future and how a student will respond to triggers against once they're introduced back into the classroom. Individual may be fine when they leave like a mental health facility, but when they go back into the classroom, they may experience their trigger again and go right back to where they had begun before. So there's no way that a doctor can just determine the future and be like, after this happens, I'm sure they'll be fine back in the classroom. So it's really an inadequate way to judge how a student, an individual, not just a student, just an individual is going to respond to their triggers. It's just not an efficient or accurate way to deal with that. Second question, how would I deal with Tommy? Not deal with him. What would my procedures be in the classroom for Tommy? My first thing was, if I knew what I did, because I don't know that I'd have access to the information on what he was writing on those notes and everything. But if I knew that he was concerned about his self-worth and his self-image, I would make sure that I'm praising him and acknowledging his successes and trying to help him change his mindset that failures aren't failures, they're just opportunities to improve. But I'd also want to take into consideration, when I heard about this, I thought of the book 5 Love Languages, and how the author, I don't remember who the author is, how he said that not everybody feels loved and appreciated the same way. And so my big question would be, what does Tommy need to feel loved and appreciated? What does he need to feel like he is valuable and an asset to life in the community in general? Because for me, I really like words of affirmation, but I thought of my sister, who she really just likes quality time. So for Tommy, would it be, he needs that physical high five, because sometimes, getting a high five is going to be more to him than me saying that he's doing really good. Or maybe it's that quality time of where he just can, hang out in the classroom, we can sit and talk about his passion. I think of my brother John, who means a lot to him if you just sit and talk about old cars with him. That quality time is a key thing. And so my big question would be, what does Tommy need? What are the things I can do that will speak to him on a deeper level than just doing what I think he needs? Is what will make him feel loved? For the third question, I read the article, Anxiety, the hidden culprit in behavior issues. What really stood out to me in this was the acknowledgement that when we have rewards for, trying to curb and assist in behavior issues, it can't be a colloquial reward. For some students, they really struggle with talking with people. So if they can make it through a week without blowing up on somebody, don't give them a reward where they get to hang out and have to talk to more people. Give them the option of, if they like it, go to the library or whatever. What's going to give them that seclusion? If someone doesn't really like sport or being outside or being with lots of people, extended recess for them probably isn't going to be the answer. That's something I really appreciated about this article, was that it acknowledged that what may work for one person, make them feel like they're being rewarded, isn't going to be the same for the other person. Like extended recess, that's not terribly relevant to high schoolers, but it is a good thing to think about, is that while extended recess to me may seem like a great idea, they may think that's a whole extra 10 minutes that I have to stand on a playground with 80 other screaming kids, where I'd rather be sitting in the library, And I also think for high schoolers, it may be extra time on their phone, which I think is a whole different set of issues, but extended time on their phone, that might be something. Just picking out something that's going to speak to that student. I thought that was something that the article touched really well. And the other one was being flexible in academics. I know for me, when I was in high school, tests stressed me out because I couldn't handle the time. The clock ticking seemed like my enemy. I remember there's times where I just couldn't focus because I knew that the clock was ticking against me, and I still struggle with it. And so if I struggle with it, I can pretty much guarantee that there's a couple of my kids that struggle with it. So acknowledging that and saying, you know what, hey, saying up front, don't worry about your handwriting. Don't worry about your spelling. Don't worry about the time. If you're running out of time, we'll make things work. Also, don't worry about your handwriting. Just make it, if I can at least read it and see what you're trying to write, then we'll probably be okay. Those are the big things. It's knowing that I'm not going to come down on them for those things. I think that might be a big start to help, and they kind of touched on that in the article, and that's another thing in the article that really spoke to me. The final thing that stood out to me was, or when we were talking about the slides, what stood out to me in the slides, the biggest one was depression. And I guess the first thing that stood out to me was depression and anxiety. I always kind of thought they went hand in hand. And I realized, there's, I keep on saying, sorry, how often, depression, it has really interesting things. One thing I saw that was interesting was that recurring thoughts of death with or without a specific plan. I think that's just that was kind of heartbreaking, that when there's a lot of times, we spent this whole unit talking about when to take those aggressive thoughts seriously, and it's like, where is the cutoff? How are they struggling with that? And just finding an outlet on how they can, I guess, talking about death, I guess, is kind of a morbid thing, but talking about it, because it said there's like recurring thoughts about death, but not having a specific plan. Sometimes I think being able to open that up, I guess, in some ways, and talk about it, and it's a hard topic, but being able to open it up and be like, it's a hard topic, but can we talk about it? I think as I'm looking at the list of symptoms in depression, I think if we're asking the question, how can this make me a better teacher, is being open to have the hard conversations about this kind of thing. There's going to be students that are struggling with this, and finding the best tools to help me so I can have an intellectual and open conversation about it, because it is hard. It is kind of dark, but being able to open up a comfortable and safe space for them so we can ask these questions. The biggest thing I see as I'm looking at the screen here is recurring thoughts about death with or without a specific plan. And I'm sure with those thoughts come questions, and being able to, I can help answer the questions, but also connect them with a counselor, because like we said, this isn't to make me a counselor, but make me a better teacher, and being like, I know we need to have hard conversations will happen, and just finding out what I need to do to be comfortable in having the hard conversations. And these slides are the first step to being able to have the hard conversations. That's what I'm saying when we're talking about, when I noticed that, the reoccurring thoughts about death, because it's a hard topic. So that's kind of what stood out to me in that. The other one is the difference in men and women in how they deal with mental illness disorders. I'm looking, when we look at depression, females are 2 times more likely to struggle with it. With eating disorders, women are more likely to struggle with it. With PTSD, women are 20% of women, if they experience a traumatic event, are more likely to develop PTSD, while 8.2% of men will struggle with it. Social anxiety disorders, 1.5 to 2.2 times more than males will females struggle with social anxiety. I think this is something that, as I'm looking and answering the question for myself, how is this going to make me a better teacher? I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's going to be this difference in class, and acknowledging that there's going to be girls in my class that are struggling with this, and you can't I think a lot of times society wants us to think of boys and girls as being exactly the same. They experience things exactly the same, which there's no research that solidifies that at all. But I think a lot of times with current gender discussions and everything, they kind of want us to deny that part. And while there's no research to support it, there's that urge to do so. And so I think this right here is just an acknowledgement that in the classroom, there's going to be differences, and you can't have your class, be one colloquial response to mental illness. Like, I don't know if this is going to be unpopular or not to say in this video, but I think that girls are going to need different attention in dealing with school and life in some ways than guys are. This isn't to say that guys aren't struggling with eating disorders or depression or social anxiety or even PTSD from something that may have happened at home or work or anything. But it's just looking at the statistics and seeing that girls are going to have a little bit harder time and more difficulties processing through what's going on in school and in life. The third thing that stood out to me was anxiety disorder, and how that is something that deals with genetic. It said, again, we see females are twice as likely to struggle with that, and anxiety is more prominent in people with European descent. And so I think that's another thing to be considered of, is, who is going to be struggling with anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder. I think along with this kind of ties in with my other 2 points, is that just being aware of how the statistics show how mental illness relates to the individual and kind of how they fit into a community of people. The fourth one is how each one of these anxiety or these mental illness disorders are going to need to be dealt with in a different way. Anxiety is going to need to be dealt with in a different way than like PTSD. There's a difference in PTSD and OCD and everything, and it's not like I knew that, but it's just like there's going to need to be, and it's really impossible, and I've seen this as I've been student teaching, it's going to be it's so hard to differentiate between students and what their needs are. And this is just another way with what students are dealing with in life, that depending on how they're dealing with life and how it aligns with these mental states, is it's going to require a different response and different ways to assist them. And so when I'm thinking about the question, how is this going to make me a better teacher, is just being able to acknowledge that I can't respond to if someone is struggling with one mental illness in some way. My response may have to be different to someone else. Also, I think as I'm looking at these mental illness things, is acknowledging that, yeah, it's going to help. This is going to help educate me on how to do it. It's just realizing that, I don't have the training I need to really deal with it. And so it's really good to see this and also know that we can work together with like a counselor, someone who's trained to help go through these challenges of being in high school. And my fourth one is just what I've seen. I guess what I've seen and what makes me a better teacher is, I guess, I've seen some of these symptoms. Not that I'm claiming to be diagnosing my students while I'm teaching them. It's just I've seen some of the things that I'm just, as I was reading through it, I was like, like so-and-so, I've seen them kind of look like they're working through something like this. Or so-and-so kind of did something like this research says. When I'm thinking about how this is going to make me be a better teacher, these things listed on these slides on mental illness makes it so that you have to remember to look at the people in our classroom as individuals, as people first, and not students. I've found as I've been student teaching, it's kind of tricky sometimes to be like, you're an individual, but I really need to get this lesson done so we can move on to the next unit. And so these slides, this whole discussion on where we are mentally, has been really good to remind myself that every single day I need to go to the classroom and see those kids in my class as an individual, as a person, and a student second. Those are the biggest things. I feel like that was a really roundabout way of answering that last question, but I think the biggest takeaway was that it's important to see that those kids as individuals first, and then your students.